Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we will open forum if there's anybody that would like to speak specifically for open forum. I'd invite you to do so now. You just want to stand wherever you are. And again, outside voices are appreciated. If you want to reserve comments until later in the discussion, you're welcome to do it then as well. Okay. Anybody else like to speak for open forum? Karen, go ahead.
I do have a letter that was submitted, so I'd like to read that. It says, to whom it may concern, I am a developer in Minnesota and I have done several detached townhouse projects in the metro and surrounding area. Currently, I have a project under discussion on the First Fairway at Chisago Lakes Golf Estates. The project has 32 detached townhouse lots that are 50 feet wide. They were all sold in 30 days. I have similar projects in Inver Grove Heights with 40-foot wide lots and Blaine with 54-foot wide lots. I have seen the market shift from builders looking into this product for people 50 and over, and it now has grown into the hottest product on the single-family home market. We are finding millennials that no longer want to take care of a yard or remove snow, but what they do want is a home with an unattached wall and the ability to have a 3-car garage in some cases. I have a proposed development that I am taking to the city for approval at Shadow Creek Stables. I am unable to attend the meeting tonight, but would be happy to meet with you. Thanks, Todd Christensen.
Thank you. Do we have online participants tonight that might be submitting questions? Not? Okay. All right. Let's do a quick round of introductions if we can. And again, we've got a short meeting time. So just quick name, position within the city, what governing body do you serve on? Councilmember Munson, Western. Sure.
Kelly Munson, City Council, and then I serve on Planning Commission and the FLA Advisory Board.
Hannah Molito, City Council Member. Patty Bystrom, City Council Member. Jenny Wood, EDA.
Mike Roberts, EDA.
Art Penniman, EDA.
Jackie McGee, Communication and Recreation Coordinator.
Kevin Miller, Planning Commission.
Michael King, Planning Commission.
Justin Brink, Planning Commission.
Susan Young, Planning Commission.
Paul Giard, Planning Commission. Sam Busnick, City Council, Report Commission, and EDA.
Mara Bain, Mayor. And I'd like to invite any guests as well. We just want to do a quick intro.
Yeah, Mark Smith, David Bafford, developer with Central Homes.
Ashley Dilsandro, also with Central Homes.
Staff.
Karen Durop, I'm the Deputy City Clerk, and if everybody could talk louder, that would be great.
Ryan Goodman, City Engineer.
Nathan First, Bolton A.
Annette Lanassa, Forest Lake Area Chamber.
John Dobbs, Development Consulting Services. I'm a developer.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. With that, we'll turn it over to Donovan, who will get us started with our presentation. Do whatever you need to do to get comfortable in the room and to see. Excuse me while I turn my back, but let's see.
First of all, thank you all for coming, taking your time out, especially some on short notice to attend our workshop. I believe that the real intent here is to get some sort of agreement, rough agreement, consensus, something, a shared understanding of between these appointed and governing elected bodies that deal with development. This is focused on the MXR1 zoning district, the one that for with our expanded for our expanded areas with the 2040 comp plan for the single-family zoning district, single-family and attached. The MXR1 is basically the development mode, the workhorse for the new neighborhoods we're going to see. The purpose in redoing or amending the MXR1 standards is so that they become consistent with the comp plan standards, which includes up to 6 dwelling units per acre gross density in that MXR1 low to medium density residential district. The existing single family standards for MXR1, 15,000 square foot minimum lot size, 80-foot wide lots, 30-foot front setback, 10 side, and 30-foot rear setback. The MXR1 also does allow up to 8 attached units, where each lot size there is 7,500, and for a minimum lot width is based on a minimum dwelling width, 22 feet. And now that's currently at a 3.6 dwelling units per acre gross for this current MXR1 dwelling district. As I mentioned, this can be up to 6, from 3 to 6, for that low medium density residential in the future land use plan. And just as a background, all these standards are for lots served by public water and sewer. This is a large table. It's hardly illegible as a screenshot there, but within your paper packets, you can see how it's arranged for all our peer cities. There's 10 other cities that the city of Forest Lake benchmarks its standards to. And basically, Forest Lake is on the large end of these for the minimum lot size, about third an acre, 15,000 square feet. And within the peer cities, it goes down to, Ramsey, about 4,500. And also for lot width, it goes from 80 down to 40, within this range. And then there are a few cities that I've been receiving comments on from developers of this is where they see, or perhaps where they'd like to see Forest Lake going with standards. The cities of Plymouth, Lakeville, Cottage Grove, and Rogers. And then with those, we do see some more smaller lot sizes in area in both side setbacks. So that's just kind of where we can see ourselves currently. And I'll also mention within these standards, we're required to zone land to accommodate a certain number of households in the 2040 plan period. There's no guarantee that the properties will develop like this. It's simply the zoning code needs to be able to accommodate this. The zoning code is not a promise that, for instance, the property can yield 6 dwellings per acre. And especially, I'll note that even within the 3.6 dwelling units per acre, this third of an acre minimum lot size, with the 8 attached units allowed, any developer who sought to get anything close to that maximum allowed density was putting attached units in. And within the intent of the zoning district, I still think that should be part of it, as well as provides for some housing choice, some range of affordability. And so I like to keep that in mind for decision makers here on trying to retain that intent of the MXR1 as we move forward. I'd like to provide some images, also maybe it's a little better in your paper copies, some developments. So this first one here has 70-foot wide lots with a 25-foot front setback. This happens to be in Lakeville. In the same development, we see also more of a broader streetscape. The 70-foot wide lots, 25-foot setback. And I believe this one is in that, has that 7-foot side setback there. So you have rows of homes. Also, this one comes courtesy of the city of Dayton. We have 50-foot wide lots with 7.5-foot side setback. And again, the same development, you can see the row houses. Again, they're approximately 25-foot front setback. With both of these codes, they do have that kind of separate setbacks for both garage or structure, with the idea that in both of these, where there's a 30-foot garage setback, but a 25-foot structure setback, to make the garage face a little less prominent with those. And then also, again, here's more homes with a 25-foot house front setback, 70-foot wide lot. And then and this is down to Lakeville as well. the 25-foot setback, and these are all similar developments where you have the sidewalks on this one side of the street. Again, here's one image of this the 7-foot side setback as well. Just note that in previous conversations with Chief Newman, the fire chief, seems that his break point was at 7.5 foot setback. And that's the narrowest for 15-foot structure. Distance between structures, we've seen that in Headwater, some places in Chestnut Creek. Just know that's something I consider kind of a right line. And then also, what we're also seeing is a lot of, and all these other comparative communities, there are twin home standards. In this one, there's about a 22 to 24 foot front setback to the curb for this twin home. And the twin home standard, it's not specifically a twin home standard, but within the MXR1, there is that 7,500 square foot area lot and no lot width. So this could be, something like this could be replicated as a twin home, but currently that's a 30-foot setback for this MXR1 zoning district. So I would really like to just provide this as a background. In my staff memo, I did present a proposal of what I saw as potential, get that minimum lot standard of a 70-foot wide lot with 30-foot garage setback, 25-foot structure setback, and 10-foot side setback. I don't present that as a recommendation. I think it's simply perhaps something to get the conversation going. It's something I guess as a graduate teaching assistant in 9 a.m. Undergraduate teaching sections where you don't really like to talk, so I like to throw something in there to prompt discussion. But maybe in this case we don't need it. But and even judging from some of these images, as I was looking again this evening, the 70-foot wide lots sometimes seem kind of narrow once you put a whole row of them down the street. There was a little different standard there with that 70-foot setback, but nevertheless, this is kind of what other communities are doing that they've adopted. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to Mayor Bain to begin discussion and open things up.
Thank you, Donovan. So let's open things up and start with questions or comments from Council, Planning Commission, EDA, no particular order. If anyone has any questions, clarifications, I'd like to ask if you can get the conversation started. Otherwise, also interested in just initial reactions, perspectives you might be bringing to the table tonight. This is a working session, really just to gauge temperature and to also understand where are you at with these ideas, but then also what additional information might you want to see between now and decision date. And so if there's some questions or some studies you'd like to see, that's kind of a good time to get those on the table as well. Just open it up if there's any.
Yeah, I got a question. I'm sure it's in the thing somewhere. I just don't know about it. When you've got housing this close together, very small yards, are there guidelines for developers to put in playgrounds so these kids will have some place to go play? Are there guidelines for when the developer comes in?
Certainly, there are parkland education requirements. Those can be taken in $2,500 per lot as fee in lieu of actually installing a park or creating a park. Based on the circumstance, the Parks and Recreation Commission makes a recommendation for cash or improvements. And then it goes to council, and the council makes a composition.
Okay, so it's not part of the development plan to have a park established in the center of these developments for these kids?
Every project's different, and so it might be adjacent to another park, area, and the city believes that then that park can serve the new residents. But there is but it's either land that's within the development or funds that are then directed to improvements elsewhere outside the development to improve another park to serve that growing population.
Just to give a little more color on that question and topic, historically over the last number of years, there's been kind of a policy of accepting park dedication fees in lieu of development of parks. That mindset, I would say, has shifted a bit. Donovan, do you have a time frame of like how long we've been accepting fees in lieu of park land?
It was about 2.5 years ago, a big Fenway Fields debt was paid off, and so the Park Trails and Lakes Commission did a shift and realized that they now can be flexible. And so we've been talking with one developer, and developers now, we've said, yes, we want in your concept plan a park included. It's in these sorts of situations, but or sometimes we put on the edge, so one park can serve 2 communities. When the other side develops as a larger contiguous, plot of land for a larger park.
Okay, just to comment as a realtor, and we do have more affordable housing where it's denser, but the big concern for families is we don't have any yard to put up a place that where is the closest park? And that is a deciding factor for a lot of people.
Big comment.
I guess I have questions that I'm gonna want some data on. Donovan, what I call the horse area, the Arabian Standardbred Palomino Road, that area over by the high school. I'd like to know what the density of that area is. So, because that is an example in Forest Lake of a higher density area. And I did drive through there tonight on the way here, and it's a lot of street playground. So that's, it was basketball and football back and forth that were in the streets. Fortunately, there are some cul-de-sacs and dead ends, but I just would like to know the density. The number of households that we need to do be allotted for the 2040 plan. Under our current rules, how many houses could be built, and what is our gap for what we need to have according to the Met Council. So if we don't have enough space to put the number of houses, what is that gap? And in your staff report, you also talked about affordability. And so what I would like to know is what are our current affordable housing numbers? How many do we have at 50% area? What do we have at 80% area? And what do we have at 100% median? Just so that I can judge need a little bit better. And then when you quoted the Hugo, is that their current? Because again, I drove around there this weekend, and a lot of that new stuff looks a lot smaller than what you've got there. But it may just be that I'm not judging the proper area.
Certainly, I can
Okay, I appreciate that.
Is it possible to put up a map of the EDA Customer 2040 plan of the land area that we're talking about? What is proposed to be the MXR one?
certainly.
It's helpful to have that visual of, that's the right target we should be looking at, right? Not current zoning, but future MXR1 zoning in the 2040 plan. Is that the right context point?
Correct. So the, and basic also mentioned that there is a maximum amount of attached units you can have for the MXR1. And this is a future land use plan. This was adopted by council in last year. And so the kind of the tan areas is the low medium density residential areas. So you can see, there's going to be a real large expansion. Currently it's about 16% of all the, the zoned areas. But then we have areas, within the southwest with the expansion, and all these areas are over on this, especially on this kind of, east side of 61, are all the newer areas that hadn't been, guided with low to medium density residential before.
And the example, I just wanna, I'm trying to gauge apples, if there is apples to apples comparison. So if, for example, we're looking at, let's take Ramsey as an extreme example. Does Ramsey have a smaller, and maybe you don't know particularly for Ramsey, but have communities managed this by having a smaller percentage of their land use as in this designation? Or are we talking, is there a kind of a percentage of the city or type of development, is it really apples to apples as far as size? Part of what I'm getting at is I'm wondering if is there an opportunity to do an interim step where you break out some of what is, currently, this pale yellow, which is sizable, and you have some opportunity to break that up where you might change standards in certain sections, but not for the whole thing. Is there an interim step between where we are now and what we might want to do based on, area of the city?
Well, certainly, I mean, with those the areas that will become MXR1, it's 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre. So some could be 3, at least 3, and some could be no more than 6. I mean, it could be graduated based on whatever the criteria that the city decides.
But it is for the whole district. There's not.
It's for the whole land use area,
Yeah.
but the next step is to divide it into districts or create district standards. And so there could be an MXR1 higher density district that the city decides
Councilman Chair Gerard.
Wow, that's easy. I think that the discussion on lot size is interesting, but I really think we should discuss lot width and the streetscape and what do we want for these houses. I have no problem with shrinking and width of the lots, but I think the total area of the lot is the wrong thing. It should really be the streetscape. And if you look at page 6 of your packet, and down in your slides in our packet don't match. So, it's a nice streetscape in page 6 where you have a little bit of a building and then you have the garage. You contrast that with page 8 and you have garage and a front door entrance. You don't really have a streetscape in my opinion. So I really think we need, what do we want to see as a community walking down the street or driving down the street? I have no problem with whatever the lot width is there on page 8, but maybe it should have been restricted to just a 2-car garage width. And then we would have had some room and some space on the front of that building, similar to what page 6 had. So I really think we should discuss the streetscape and how else we want to use the lot, and then it's a very simple formula to determine the square foot area.
Great suggestion. On that topic, just open it up media perspectives. And if your question is related to something different, if you can hold that for just a few. Let's talk about that question of the streetscape and lot width. Thoughts, comments?
Again, from the housing standpoint, the demand is for 3-car garages now because the lots are too small. You can't park your boat outside. You've got to hide your crap. So you need that 3rd stall for your toys. So when you're thinking about smaller lots and 2-car garage, that's what you satisfy the majority.
Do I need a 3-car garage or do I need the 3-car area where I could get by with a 2-car garage and just have it deeper?
You can do that. That's not very popular, but you can do it.
It's toys. It's the toys. It's enforced, like they got the boat and they got the jet ski and they got the snowmobile and it's the toys. My daughter recently bought a house in another city and she went away from lots that had such a short distance between the garage and the road because she couldn't have any friends over. can only park 2 cars in the driveway, then, and you're not allowed to park in the street, then she can't have friends over. And it gets a little challenging. So I think that while folks want smaller lots that they don't have to take care of and shovel snow from, if it's for a family, yeah, they're gonna want the 3-car garage for the stuff, but then they're also gonna have to want to think about, what about Thanksgiving and graduation?
Other thoughts, opinions specifically to streetscape and the
I guess all of these are pretty bare from a tree perspective, and with the small amount of area between houses and small lot sizes. Michael, you may be better able to help me on this one. How are we going to be able to have enough for tree canopy and root spread?
Well, I saw some of the pictures here with a closer, like 7 foot from the property line, so that's only 14 feet from house to house. So if you were to put a tree in there, it's like, it's almost got to be on property line. Because you're looking at some of these big trees, they have about a 40-foot canopy, big trees, so that's 20 feet on each side. So once that trunk gets up there after 10, 15 years of growth, it's going to be hanging over both homes. Now, granted, 7.5 feet as long as 15 feet, but that's still, when you start talking windows with an egress, a fence, and I'm going to go back to the firefighting part of it because I spent many years on the department, and you're going to need room to get through there. And if you have, go back to the other part, a 3-car driveway in a 50-foot or even 60-foot yard, where are you going to put a tree? And then with the roots coming up, it's going to walk over, eventually ripping stuff up from driveways, sidewalks. Is that what you were getting at? Okay. Plus, in between the homes, the roots are going to start getting into the foundations, cracking blocks and bricks. But I don't think we should not get smaller than the 7.5 feet on the width between those setbacks.
I have a question, and maybe it's for the developers. And I'll preface it by, since I became a city council member, I hear a lot from my demographic in the community. Not gonna say any more than that, but my demographic in the community, that they're looking outside of Forest Lane. Because they like these single level, smaller, kind of slab on grade, they're kind of tightly packed, and but yet attractive, and affordable for them. They don't want to move on to, the single family, 17 to 2,000 square foot home, larger lot, and they're fairly expensive. And I hear a lot about, I don't want to become house poor in my retirement. I want to be able to downsize and make a lateral move financially, or maybe, come in a little underneath the value of my current home. And so my question for you is, when we're talking about the 6 homes per acre, that particular, kind of grouping, what is typically your target audience for those homes? Yeah.
Madam Mayor, council members, EDA commissioners, thank you all for being here and letting me talk. That is exactly what I've been doing for 30 years. I've been building Rambert townhomes with full basements. I built about 900 over that time period. Took a break from about 2007 to 13 for some obvious reasons, but that's what my buyers want. That they don't have boats and toys, or if they do, they have a cabin up north, and they're gone for a lot of them for the winter. So they want a place where they can, stay with their grandkids. Because a lot of them have grandkids. That's their magnet to keep them coming back. So they'll buy one of these townhomes. They don't want the maintenance of the yard. They don't want the snow plowing in the winter. And with our association, and that's one thing I mentioned, I know, to the council before too, is a great association has these places looking nice. I know I don't only have one photo of mine up there, but I sent a bunch of them. I don't know if they all went through, but my projects look, in my mind, even after 30 years, the first project we did still looks as nice as it did. I drove through and sent some more pictures out. I don't know if they all got out to everybody. They're probably sick of my videos and stuff, but they look great because the Homeowners Association does a great job of taking care of those places. I always pick out people that buy from us that would be good board members that get focused on keeping the place beautiful. And they do look great. And one thing I know was mentioned about these straight streets and stuff, we always do a thing called coving. And coving always has bends, all the roads bend and have a shape to them, so you're not always, I look at this thing, it does look like a public works and a engineering perfection, but for it's a nice straight lines. But for my customers, they would never go and spend $500,000 or $600,000 to live in a straight road like that. They want something that's still beautiful because they're coming out of a nice house. Usually they're coming out of a house they've been in for 30 years, raised their kids. Kids are gone, and they still want to be in the area they have their kids at. They know the hospital, they know the doctors, they know the stores. They don't want to leave, but if there's nothing here, they have to go to Blaine. They have to go the North Branch. They have to go some other city that's doing that product for them. And if you don't start offering that, and my lots are typically only been about 50 feet wide, but then you get my homes are 2,000 feet of space on the main floor, and most of them have finished basements. Not everybody finishes the basement, but they can live on their main floor. If they get sick, they can live there till the day they die because the kitchen's on the main floor, the master's on the main floor, the laundry's on the main floor. The lower levels for when their kids come back to visit, or they just want some space for some groups to be together. So it's been a great product, and I'm sure the other developers that are talking about this, that is what we want to build here. And we know there's a market for it. And my site, when I bought it 18 years ago, right by Menards there, I bought it because it's a perfect site. It's got a great area to view. It's 160 acres, but there's only about 60 acres to build on. And everyone's view is, my units, the back view is out the back. They have a four-season porch. They have a deck. If they have a walkout, they're down in their patio. I have a lot of them that do a screen porch down below their four-season porch, so they can sit down there and enjoy nature. And they're not worried about their front yards. That's to them. They don't have cars parked. If you looked at any of these pictures, I've done some more pictures. I drove through there, these developments just to kind of get some more pictures for everyone. And nobody's parking in the street. No one's in the driveway because most of those buyers have one or two cars. There's a lot of widows that buy from me. There's people that just only need one car, or they have one car at their winter home or their cabin, and they just have one sitting here. So you rarely see a car sitting on the street. I just saw one car on the street out of 105 homes. I saw 12 that were in their parked on their driveway. Not one boat, not one toy. So typically, and most of the associations keep them from doing that. They can put their boat in the garage, but they can't have the boat on the driveway and stuff. So the product, the customer I'm going after might be different than maybe the ones you're talking about. They have where your daughter was at or stuff. But what I go after is that empty nester that wants to live there and have be their last home before they can find a home, basically. So I don't know if that answers the question. But again, we put a lot of clothing and shape into it, and we go after. You're our perfect demographic, or maybe not. Yeah, but you're getting.
Considering the purchase of the home and the association fees.
Yep.
Do you consider these affordable at 80% AMI?
Affordable? It's stretching on the affordable. But if they're coming out of a house that they lived in, they have a lot of equity. Typically, most of my buyers come in and it is a lateral mover. They may have to put a small loan or something, but a lot of people can sell the home, especially with the market the way it is. They get a lot of money out of the house they're in, so they can make that without much of a loan, and it is affordable. The HOA fees are pretty reasonable. I mean, I think, my last project, they're at $150 a month, and that's lawn care, snow removal, insurance. So when you take that out of the equation, figure it all out there, that's pretty affordable for most people. And the one thing I mentioned in one of my letters to you guys is that my HOAs come up with great ideas. They were tired of the way that the snowplow guys were ripping up the sod on their boulevard and making messes so they don't have to summer get the grass back and stuff. So they forced the snowplow company to come up by these little tractors that have blowers on them. So they blow all their driveways with actually a snow blower that's attached to a tractor, so they don't damage the yards, they don't damage the sod. And it also spreads out the snow, so you don't have these big piles like a lot of these don't associate these townhome developments. There's snow piles a mile high, and with a snow blower, they just blow it out and it looks great. So the associations have worked really good to do a better job for the homeowners that live there, and the homeowners make sure they have a great community. And if any of you go through them, you'll see that they are just great places, and they've held their value, and they sell, even during the bad market, those things would sell in days. So when things were slow in between 2007 and 2013, things would sell in the ones especially in Shreveport would sell in hours, even during that time period. It's just, there's a market for it. The baby boomers are getting in retirement age and they want to have this kind of lifestyle. But yeah,
Mark, I think you had a question.
Well, I'm very sympathetic to what Paul was talking about, the imagery of the streetscape. It seems to butt heads directly always with this idea of density, with a marketplace that's accepting, that wants, you know, the imagery of a garage to the marketplace right now seems to be so acceptable that it's hard to fight that. But I'm really sympathetic. I wish we could dance with more of what you're talking about, but it gets hard when you start to set the side yard, the width, and the frontage, and the setback, and then controlling the animal that's going to sit on that site when the marketplace is saying, you know, I love the 3-car garage idea. That doesn't give me room for anything but an entry. But that flows in the marketplace so well right now. I wish we could reinforce in some fashion the imagery. I just don't know how to do it.
I was mentioning that combing though, and I think if you have a good designer, you can do both. I mean,
oh, far better than a straight street, absolutely.
Right. I mean, we want to follow the wetland path and have, you know, follow the areas. I mean, you can, instead of taking a cornfield and running a bunch of straight lines, I mean, we sure try, because that's what the market wants. They don't want to live on a straight road. So if we can do it, I think most developers are out to do the, you know, what's going to be best, because you got to sell. You still have to sell. And if you have something that's boring or dull, they're not going to pay as much, or because they're comparing it to other products out there. So if you're not inventive and creative, you're not, you know, you have to be an artist, not just a developer. You have to be creating something that people want. And I think we do a good job, but I know other developers do too. I mean, there's some beautiful projects out there, so I think they can do both.
Other questions, comments? Okay, just weigh in a little bit on this question of the streetscape. I do think it's important, and I think however we manage the overall development design standards has to kind of play a part of this on just the overall development of, yes, if the yards are smaller, either side yards or the front setbacks are smaller, then we have to provide some greater focus on common play space than what we had in the past. And to the extent that we're able to encourage interesting design aesthetic rather than straight lines, whatever we can do in the standards to encourage that, I would be all for. I think there's a way that we can creatively, get those smaller, those smaller footprints, but I think that also forces us to be a little more creative on the design standards so that that smaller footprint is complemented by something. Or else, if we don't require that, then the market just takes over, and some developers will do it and some developers won't. I think it's up to us to kind of set that. What is the standard for us? Donovan, how do we manage that? So going from the lot size to like the overall standards for the development, is that something that is kind of, is that a negotiation development by development, or is there a way, how do we as policymakers kind of help influence not so much what's happening on the individual lot, but what's happening on the overall community?
Kind of those design changes.
Yes, right,
Yeah, I mean,
right.
you certainly, I think one of the places we want to get to with conversations like this is to provide more certainty to the developer. And some of that can be obtained through design standards. Community, and it's currently the city, this is for all zone districts, only has standards for lot width and area. Those are really the concrete ones. And there's other language with intent to zoning code, and so maybe it's a 2D, there's some language around what enhancements there should be. But some communities take the approach of maybe a maximum percentage of garage space, or they do that, they kind of recess the garage space. They provide curving streets or greater connectivity so you don't have long stretches without intersections. To promote walkability, I think, as I mentioned, like the city has taken some turn toward, now accepting the park areas, and I think the idea is you accept the land plus enough room for enough small enough land where there's money for improvements as well. It's part of that dedication fee. there's a wide range of tools to actually, introduce the design element that I think, achieves what developers want with smaller lot sizes. But, I agree with you, Mark, the design really could matter a lot. You spend your life doing it, but it's kind of like, I think design can really, take care of and really kind of hide that density, whether it's single family or apartment buildings.
Hey, let's just in the,
Donovan, if we just say in the zoning code that you can do 6 dwelling units per acre, out on 200, there's 120 for sale, so they could put, if we just say you can go up to 6 dwelling units per acre, they could put 720 houses there. There is no real requirement at 6 dwelling units per acre for saying that there has to be a park or anything, because that would cut down on the number of dwelling units per acre in the entire subdivision. At some point tonight, I'd like Ryan and Donovan to talk about if we go in this direction, we are going to see a very large number of dwellings in the city within the next 5 years. Where are we at on water, especially? Where are we at on policing? Where are we at on our fire department? Because if you look at the cost of a dwelling, it's usually about 1.5 times whatever you get in terms of taxes for a city. And that's for a city that's in like the middle of the range of the region, and we're really on the low range. So how are we going to make sure that we've got enough dollars from the rest of the city taxpayers or ratepayers in terms of water to be able to provide services, police, fire, water, public works?
Certainly, those are great concerns, and that is something that, first of all, I'll say that the zoning code again is not a promise. I mean, this is potentially a maximum. Within that, the current 3.6 dwelling units per acre allowed. Chestnut Creek, for instance, we had about 2 dwelling units per acre gross. The Planning Commission reviewed a concept plan part of the Taylor Farm. That was in a range of maybe about mid-2s. John, was it like under 3 dwelling units per acre? There's so much wetlands in Forest Lake that this, I think at 36 out of 60 maybe acres that were actually upland. So there are lots of things that really are countervailing conditions that don't allow any developer to get that 6.
I'm just looking at this area south of 97 around 61, pretty flat, it's all farmland, there's not a lot of wetlands in that area.
Yeah. So in some of those areas, they may not be similar to what we've seen in the past. I mean, some are. I mean, there's floodplain in there. Actually, 2019 during preparation of the 2040 plan, did which was probably the biggest piece beyond the policy decisions, was the underground, policy, underground infrastructure plan. So it's water and sewer plans that relate to pipe sizing. So it was a really big effort to actually make sure that in the future, as projects came in, the pipes could be sized correctly and also put it proper depth and gravity sewer, so that you wouldn't get behind the 8 ball with that. As far as the safety courses, be adequate, that's something that's an ongoing challenge. I think council has enough information to make the right decisions at the right time.
hey, you next and then in the back.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I'll just stand up to make it a little easier. Bill Griffith, I work with a lot of developers. I also work with Mark Smith. I'm also a city attorney, and so I kind of see it from both sides. I've been on both sides of the question. One of the things that you think about flexibility, you already have a tool in your code, the plan unit development. I don't know how much it's been used in Forest Lake. Has it
quite a bit.
So you're familiar with that. And, you know, one of the things that I've noted in recent years, as developers try and create creative places, they use that tool. So you look at the standards, you're moving in a direction towards, you know, smaller lot sizes, reduce setbacks, but then you have this tool for flexibility around wetlands, around open spaces, and as I reviewed your ordinance, it has all of those considerations in it. So as a backdrop, as you think about trying to get that really special development, that's a tool that we would likely use as we come through the city. And it's a tool that's used in your neighboring communities, and apparently it's been used extensively here. So I wanted to put that as a backdrop, because you don't have to solve everything in this zoning move, but it's already in your code, and something that virtually every development I've worked on in the last decade has gone to. Why? Because there's a trade-off. You know, you provide the open space, you provide the trails, you provide the amenities, and then you get to the higher density. So just an observation.
So my name is John Dobbs, Development Consulting Services. So I'm involved in the Hidden Creek project, but I did want to give you a little bit of context. So to go back to the Ramsey line, which was a question I heard you ask a little bit, that's actually a project being done by Capstone Homes. I represent the landowners that are selling the land to Capstone. And I just throw some general numbers out, which may help with the context and really kind of tags on to what the attorney was just talking about. The project's being done as a PUD. There's 78 acres total. Yes, there are about 100 of the 278 lots that are 40 foot wide. There are also a significant amount of them that are 65 foot wide. And then there's some that are 55 foot wide. They have a park, which the developer is going to improve. They're going to put 8 acres of virgin timber, which is almost, well, it was cut in the early 60s to the best that they can guess. And it is flat cornfield. And that is what it is. So the overall density is more like 3.4, even with this 3.4 usable and Donovan did a remarkable job getting all this stuff together, is at 4,356 square feet. That will be the smallest villa lot Ramsey's allowed ever to have. The previous ones were more like 5,500 square feet, which was the north side of the same project done 7 years ago. So hopefully that'll give some context, because I think to tag on to both the gentlemen in the corner's point, the market is what people also don't really talk a lot about. There's the environmental, there's what do you as a council and a planning commission see as a vision for your city, and then there's what do the people really want to buy. And if Capstone did 78 acres at 40 foot wide lots, I don't think they'd be very successful. They don't think they'd be very successful. They have 5 or 6 different house types, and affordability, you know, even a 40 foot wide villa lot, I believe, and don't quote me because this pulls back my memory, built 1,100, you might know this better than me, 1,200 square foot, $270,000, $280,000 at the very, very, very low end for a one level living where people have a chance to do some other kind of style and climb stairs. I'm sick of climbing stairs personally. I don't live there anymore. And it really was a collaborative effort between the planning person, Tim Gladhill, now over at Stillwater, Capstone, the developers there, me. I have a background in landscape architecture. I've been doing this for a long time. And we really came up with something really cool. And Donovan and I were beginning to do that with Hidden Creek, and now he's abandoning me. But there is something about that, and there are sites that absolutely fit that bill, like he was just describing. And then there's other sites where people are going to want big single-family houses, because that's what people really want if they can get it. We did a site in, and I'll take it to the extreme. We did a site in Woodbury, up in the northeast corner of Woodbury, and I lived there for 25 years and did a number of projects there. We were trying to find a way to solve this exact problem. How do you get smaller and at the same time still keep the Woodbury feel, right? We ended up doing a small single-family site that was 65-foot wide lots and 60s. It was, to this date, I think, one of the few single-family detached, real detached products that was by an association. So when you live there from 2004 to today, you pay $75 a month cut your grass, plow your driveway, city does the streets. Those houses have appreciated at least as fast as every other house in Woodbury. A lot of them were tandem garages because, yeah, if somebody gets their druthers 3 cars wide, sure. But can you put the boat at the back end and still park your 2 cars in the front? Sure, absolutely. So the market and the builders, the creative builders and the creative approaches to these things will solve some of those problems on their own. Because at the end of the day, the last thing in the world I ever want to experience again, and I'm sure anybody else that was doing the business in 2007, is have a whole bunch of stuff that you can't sell. That's a real problem for the city and for everybody else. And so that's kind of a push-pull. And so I think with the PUD code and with minimums, Tim Gladhill would not go down to 40-foot wide lots in Ramsey, which is this 4,356 square footage, unless the overall density and unless they got other things. It was just this, and it took 2 years to negotiate this stuff out. It's going to be a heck of a project when they're done, and they'll be lifestyle from 550 down to 2 and everything in between, and it's really going to be a great project. And yeah, some of the streetscapes are pretty tough to describe it the way I hear you guys talking about it. But at the same time, there are going to be people living there that wouldn't have been otherwise. And in that same Woodbury project I referenced earlier, we also were doing some high density stuff on the other side. And because of density swaps, and I'm not advocating anything here on a political level, but I always want to try to give something back. I was able to give, at the time, 12, but eventually we ended up giving 24 lots for Habitat for Humanity, which built a townhouse project. And there are 24 families living in Woodbury and Stillwater schools that wouldn't have been there otherwise. But just by the city working through density swaps, no grants, no nothing. So it is a very powerful tool, but the minimums have to be set and there has to be something in it for both sides, right? One skipping down the street, they're happy, probably wasn't a fair deal. Both people irritated, maybe that's a fair deal. For what it's worth.
Kevin, did you have a question or comment that you had to
I didn't, but thank you for asking. I have
This
lots
is
of
good, let's
thoughts running through
continue
my
to
head.
just keep it open, open questions, comments, and also, quick time check, we've got about 20 minutes left. If there are pieces of information that you would like Donovan to put on his homework list to provide, as we're bringing this topic back to planning commission and council, now's a great time to make those requests too. Okay.
So I'm David with Central Homes, and I'm here tonight. I was hoping to kind of hear what the city wants. I mean, we can get into all of these details, but I think in some ways setting what does the city really want, because then if you come in with a PUD application, you might be able to get some of those things. So kind of more of a broad visioning of what that might look like, because as a developer and a builder, we can be super creative, sometimes more creative than people might want to. John just talked about the city of Ramsey wouldn't go down below 40-foot lots. Well, I tell you they did, because I have 30-foot lots in the city of Ramsey, because it solved a problem that the city really had some very specific, this is what we want. And so I said, okay, here you go. What about this idea? And it worked, but it was a setting a vision. Instead of setting standards, and then I have to fit a house into those standards, it was setting a vision or a goal of why does the city want to allow smaller lots? Well, is that the market? Well, then if you don't like what is coming in, then begin to set that. The other thing that I just wanted to just weigh in a little bit here, and I hope the city engineer doesn't get frustrated with this, but all of this design stuff sometimes is driven by other things outside of how it's gonna look. We did a coving project, but we had to have our manholes be at the center of the road, and then as your road turns, you have a bunch of more manholes along. So it made it much more expensive, so we walked away from the coving project because of engineering. And I trust why the engineer does that. The other thing is the density. You're not seeing a whole lot of attached townhomes to get up to 8+ units to the acre, because right now building code requires fire sprinklers for attached. But for twins, you don't need to be attached. So there's other things outside of design standards or layouts that are important and will still drive some of these decisions. And so it's just some things, and so that's why I, as the builder or somebody working with landowner, would rather have a kind of a vision or a goal that might help us to get that, and whether we stick with standard zoning or go PUD to help accomplish that goal would be more beneficial from our perspective, because we bring in an architect and a land planner and others, and with some creativity, sometimes we can make those things. Sometimes the land doesn't really help. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think the city is at this juncture where a fair amount of people want old-fashioned suburbia with the wider lots, less density. And then we have the retirees and the younger people, and I'm at that retiree one, that are starting to think about a smaller lot, and I really think that we need a lot of input to get there. I'd love to hand you a vision, but I don't think we have one, and that's why we're here.
And,
We're a single vision.
and along that
We
note,
don't have a single vision.
allowing variety. You know, you don't want 1,000 acres of 40-foot single level living, but to have some places for large lots, some places for small lots, some places for density, so.
I would ask the question, are there communities that have gone beyond just the zoning standards and the lot standards, that have painted a strong vision that, not that we're going to copy that
Right.
exact vision, but who's done a good job of creating that vision? What are some example communities where you feel like you understand that vision? Again, we're gonna pick the
So,
first like version
yeah.
right
So,
now, but
a couple thoughts on that. The city of Blaine, only because they've done so many PUDs, you know what the city council and planning wants, because you can look at the previous PUDs. So that's maybe not a good one, but the city of St. Michael passed a zoning code that encourages and allows smaller lots in exchange for open space. And so that's what they wanted, and we just approved a project in that code. Even though it was zoning, and we matched the zoning, there was some negotiations about what that looks like, what the open space is, where it's located, how it's finished. But they had that, if you want density, if you want to go more than smaller than 8-foot lots, you can, and what we're looking for is open space. And so those 2 are examples.
So now you're back to the PUDs.
It's not technically a PUD, it was a zoning code, but it was a PUD with predetermined negotiation things that the city wanted.
Fine tune it.
Right.
That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Could you follow up
Yeah.
for just a second? Do we, I guess I'd ask the group, we've done a lot of PUDs in the city of Forest Lake. Do we have common themes that we have built into those that help to paint that picture of a vision? And is there some value in pulling that together? I guess I'd ask Darwin.
I'll let Susan, she's burning and talking.
And my question is, the PUDs that we've done recently are, well, we can't build on this wetland, so you have to let us be more dense. Or and to me, the PUD is sort of a what's in it for the developer, what's in it for the city. And because you can't build on wetland isn't a what's in it for the city. Because we can't use that as recreational space, except for duck hunting, and then people get really angry because,
From their dad.
yeah, the neighbors don't like the duck hunting.
We've had those calls.
Yes, and so when we think about the vision, and I'm gonna look for what St. Michael did, is it the exchange of density because you want a property you couldn't build out, or is it density for a public use?
And I would say we have, the planning commission had one conversation around PUD criteria. What does that look like? What public amenities is the city looking for? I mean, maybe it's not the kind of vision that, full vision that you want, but it's more like the, Chinese dim sum restaurant approach. You satisfy these criteria, we're looking for these. If you provide those, then we'll we can give you flexibility.
One thing I was, I know I'm not supposed to talk about this, I was told that we're not going to talk about the setbacks, the streets. And I do think that creates an issue though for these PUDs, it doesn't necessarily go together. I mean, if you look at just, for example, the current right-of-way, if you have a there's a 40-foot right of way, they're basically asking for it's a 60 foot, but then they want an additional 10, so it's 40 feet. You take 40 by 7, that's 2,800 square feet of area you're losing. Then another 30 foot for the setback from that right of way. Now you have another 28, so it's 30, another 2,000. And then you have the side yard, and then you add the rear yard. All of a sudden you have 8,000 feet of just setbacks for a lot. Well, there's no way you're going to ever get the 6 units per acre, 5 units. You can't even get 4 units without a house on it. So those setbacks need to change, or all this stuff's kind of a waste for everybody because you're not allowing, with the setbacks, you're not even allowing you to have room for a house at the 3 and 4 units per acre. And if someone wants to do, I mean, most of my developments were always around 3 units per acre, but I can't get anywhere near that with the setbacks that the city currently wants. So it's a combination. There's nothing set in stone. I think everything has to be looked at on an individual basis, but I think you can't be stuck on those standards, or you're never going to change what they're doing.
When you say setbacks, are you also, you're including in that street width?
The street right,
Minimum street
right,
width.
because there's basically, yeah. I mean, my best projects are, you go, most of them, they're all somewhere between 20 and 30 on the street. They have, you know, from that point on, it's anywhere from 25 to 35 feet of space for the driveway, and you have to have a sidewalk in there, but that gives you enough space. Again, my customers don't need all that driveway space. They don't have all the toys because they're done with that. And it's again putting the focus on the backyards. I heard someone say that there's no backyards for the swing sets, and you're right. When you make these streets so wide, that one picture showing that one thing, they are pushing the houses farther back with all this area, and also there's no backyard left. And it's really, people want backyards. That's what you want your kids there. You don't want them down the street at the playground. You want them to be able to watch your kids. So I think you want to narrow that up. Plus, you're creating more bituminous surface. I know in Plymouth and Corcoran, they both have been going to 50-foot right-of-ways, narrowing that down because they want less bituminous surface. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do, so there's less water to treat. I mean, on my project alone, I've sent some pictures of it. On my site alone, there's over an extra acre of bituminous because of the longer driveways they're requiring and the wider streets. And that's 220 cars of area you're paving, and it's also like, on a 2-inch rain, it's like 4,500 gallons of water you have to treat that you wouldn't normally have to treat. So it's a lot.
Let's parking lot engineering standards to another, but I think your point is made in that they do hang together, so.
Yes, thank you, sorry.
Councilmember President?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here a little bit too, because of the snow plowing situation in the streets. That ends up being a public issue. Keep narrowing that down. What are we going to do with that? You know, it didn't happen so much last year, but the year before we had a tremendous amount of snow. So there's some considerations that we have to think about for public works too, and those are all considerations. The other issues too, you have houses, 15 feet apart, roughly. Don't you have to have a wire firewall on each side?
Well, my units, I'm actually usually about 30 feet. My units actually, again, I'm different than some guys, but my side yards are actually large areas, so I have some larger, because my units are side loaded and a little different than some people's, but yeah, you're right about the fire. If they get too close, there is a rating. I think it's more from the lot line than it is from the, it would require you to have a fire rating. I think if you're within 5 feet, or maybe it's 7.5 feet, you have to have a fire rating at the sidewall.
Snow would be that's something to be overcome. I think as a city, we need to be thinking about our public works too. I know where you're coming from.
It's a balancing act. You got to try to make everyone happy. There's usually about 11 snowfalls over 2 inches, and so you have to do everything based on the snowfall, but at the same time, it's a problem. So for that time, you got to deal with it.
Nothing's average anymore.
Okay, I can't disagree with you there. Thank you.
Blake,
So looking at the staff proposal or Donovan's, what does everyone in the room think of what he's proposing with the developers? Is that something that would be acceptable, or what you feel would be obviously the direction you want to go, or is there anyone that has any angst about what he's proposing and how we're coming this down?
Donovan, do you want to just maybe review, just what your proposal is?
Yes, certainly.
9 a.m.
Yeah, so the,
Right, this is an example.
looking at the broader, kind of looking at peer cities, what we want to get to, something closer to that 6 dwellings per acre with a single family lot.
Diane, hit a minute.
What I see here is a 6,500 square foot lot, which is a 70-foot width, about 92-foot depth. and to, and then have that recessed garage front, 5 feet back. So there is a longer driveway for the toys, and I do see that on daily drives before, so like, if people have stuff, and stuff on the front of their garage, it's gonna go in the driveway leading up to that garage front, the garage door. Minimum setback side setback 10 feet. We did do a lot of, we did the 7.5 feet in Chestnut Creek. Once you have different builders, different split entry, full basement, lookout, walkout, it doesn't seem like the 7.5 feet really is enough to recover, to do proper drainage. It's needed between different, different housing foundation elevations. And that's where that comes from, just administering 7.5 in challenging situations. And then minimum rear setback is recommend 30. Our code does allow unenclosed decks to be 20 feet from the rear property line. So it's basically kind of, that model is 30-foot front, 30-foot of house, and 30 feet of rear yard. And just based on that, to Mark, to your point around, the 60-foot wide right of way, these 6,500 square foot lots puts you a little bit under 5 units per acre on a straight street, no environmental constraints or anything, just the featureless plain. And so it's and again, isn't my intent that detached units are where you get your 6 dwellings per acre, but it seems to kind of be the middle ground between having something that is nearer, and also does relate to community character. I mean, that's something the planning commission discussed. What is Forest Lake? And generally it is the larger lot. So we're down to the 43,565.6 square feet of Ramsey, but we're also basically cutting half of the current 13,000. So so it's kind of, to me, that would be the bottom. That would be the tightest that I can see for here. But I think there's a lot of discussion.
Something I wanted to touch on, though, I think some people alluded to, is just the affordability aspect. I'm just afraid we don't want to be pricing people out of the market either. And I know there's several realtors in this room, and I was just curious, any of your clients that you feel are being priced out of the market due to needing to have the minimum lot size that we have. They don't want it, but they have to have it in order to live in Forest Lake. Does that make sense?
It's really tough for people to find anything like in the 2,000 square feet for under 250. The first-time buyers, the returning buyers, a lot of them can only afford 200 to 225. There's nothing out there for them. They're buying. I put on 2 condos on Friday and then sold on Saturday, and there's lines of people that want your product, but a lot of them don't have the money for it. They do need the smaller ones for retired people. 1,200 square feet is fine. For families, minimum 1,500, 1,800, and they can't afford it.
Yeah.
That's why they're renting and paying more for rent.
Right.
I wouldn't say, for what they could do for a monthly pay is crazy.
And I can understand, I wish I had a 3-car garage right now where I could put my toys and stuff. There's many other people who would that too, but Kathy was saying, I mean, there's people who are wanting to downsize or empty nesters, or wanting to get into smaller homes. And I just feel the demand that we have in that southern area, I think we really should take a look at considering lowering that minimum lot size to increase that affordability.
Well, I think when we came together, I can't remember the company that presented to us. I did a demographic profile as we were talking about some planning, city planning. That was a while ago. I'm sure we put that together.
ULI, Minnesota ULI.
Yeah, and they were, and I know a lot of data that I looked at bears this out, is that we are going to be an aging we start to shift back the other direction. So you've got, I don't know that we're paying attention in Forest Lake to what's going on, and I can speak from a personal perspective. My husband and I are shopping right now, and we've been looking outside of Forest Lake. I would love to stay here, but Forest Lake doesn't have what we need. It doesn't have that transitional housing for us. So, you know, I know that I'm not alone. I hear it a lot from members of the community and in my demographic. So, so I think there's opportunity. You know, I just am not quite sure what that is yet.
I would agree with that. Because if you look at when they build an apartment building, it's full before it's built.
Yeah.
And so there's a high demand for that type of house. Well, not, you know, just because of the size and the costs and all that kind of stuff. So I think there is a market for it.
And you look at family communities for some of these smaller smaller home developments. Can you look at, 55 plus development, for example? I mean, so that's maybe part of that visioning a little bit. That's something for us to think about.
It would be interesting to know what kind of savings are we talking about if we go to smaller lots. I can understand if you go to narrower lots, the street's already in, you just have to stub out for water and sewer to an additional house, so your cost is somewhat more minimal. But if I just go to a smaller lot, I still have to put a road down that street and water. So how much money are we talking about saving on the cost of a house by shrinking our lots? And I have, to be honest, I have no idea what that number is. And I'm thinking that the people around us outside of this room have a pretty good handle on it.
And did I hear you saying that those properties that you're marketing now are in the 250, 275,000 range for something new?
No, I was at two. That was maybe
Okay, not me.
Okay.
Okay, which one of you are in there? For these lots are in what they're looking for? Okay.
So I'm sorry, what was the question? Well, let me just, if I could, real quick. The gentleman was talking about the city having a vision. I'd like to just really briefly pick up on that. One of them is, I don't know St. Michael, so I'll take his word for it. Ramsey, for context, 5,600 well and septic lots in the city of Ramsey. By their city charter, they cannot force those people to hook up sewer and water. Average lot size is 1.7 acres on those 56. So from their vision, it was like, okay, we got this big city with a lot of septic, we've got some open land. This is what we want to try to do. They came up with a vision, and that's how we worked through it. Design charrettes are a great way for people to kind of work through some of that stuff, because I actually believe you two came up with a foundational mission statement, which is, I forget exactly how it was phrased, so pardon me for not being able to be verbatim about it, but I heard you say kind of the traditional single-family large lot, and I heard you say something smaller that I can retire and that I can have some density and I don't have to take care of it. To me, that would be a huge step forward, because that speaks to both sides of a foundational vision if the council and the planning commission were to decide that was something to go with, because it gives people options, and then you have environmental factors, money factors, adjacent land use, all the planning creativity and all the things that Donovan and I spent a fair amount of time talking about. Then everybody can kind of put a vision together. So I think that's a remarkably good suggestion, that if the council and the planning commission can establish a vision, then maybe there's a way for us to creatively begin to fill it, and everybody wins. I think that's a great idea.
Just a quick comment, one of the things you can't control is the cost of building materials, the cost of land, but you can control the charges, the fees, the park fees, the building materials that you require. All of those things are within your control. And the Met Council has studied this, the Builders Association has studied it. At one time, they actually partnered on the study, which is remarkable. They were in the same place for a little while. So there's a lot of good data out there. And I know you want to put your Forest Lake stamp on things, and you will. But ultimately, you're headed in the right direction with getting smaller, because that's one of the things that can affect cost. So there's a lot of good data out there. I think you've heard from some developers in the room tonight. And one of the questions I have is, what is your timetable as a city you know, how long will you be looking at this, and when do we get to file an application for you?
Donna, do you have some thoughts on
You can follow what you do now.
good question for maybe
Yeah, I mean-
next steps and
We're looking at them now.
timetable?
Yeah, so, you know, we have, started some preliminary discussion, with the consultant and with, the city attorney around, they estimate it to be a 2 to 3 year project, because they wanna look at all kinds of stuff like, you know, dog credit, you know, like city, a lot of the city code stuff, I believe, but, I think that there are some pieces the city can pass, that will, you know, there's a lot of stuff around the, you know, the comprehensive plans are kind of baked in, you know, as far as like say densities and infrastructure, you know, capacities that relate to the densities. Or, you know, PUD standards, set street dwelling unit standards. So I think there's some pieces that we can tease out within that, not to scare away, you know, you know, all of it doesn't have to be a 2 to 3 year project, but it is something, some pieces can be teased out, but some can't.
I guess I would encourage us to me 2 to 3 years is a long way. And it might take 2 to 3 years to get every I dotted and every T crossed, but I would encourage us to focus on setting that vision, because then once you set the vision, then I think the pieces that come into that are, you have an idea of how that might be chunked out further. And I would just encourage us to push on that thought that it's a 2 to 3 year long time.
That's the attorneys, I think staff, I'm more of the 1 year timeframe.
Other wrap-up comments, anything that hasn't been said that's burning? Donna, you indicated kind of a longer time frame. Are there some more immediate next steps that you would expect to either go to the planning commission or who sees this next, I guess, would be the question.
Well, it would be some more in-depth conversations with the planning commission. With that process, I do believe that, you know, we should consult with, the city council at, some more discussion and workshop items, advisory type exchanges. I do believe this one is based on conversation I'm having with some people in this room that revising the MXR1 standards are a priority. So I think we look forward to getting that part of the discussion.
Chair Jordan, anything else you would add or any other requests you have?
Anyway, the planning commission can help. I think I speak for all of us. Tell me if I don't.
And I would just say, welcome the opportunity for, if a common working session is helpful and it's helpful for everyone to hear it all at the same time and get some input, happy to accommodate another working session like this, so.
Yeah, I'd love to see, we mentioned it earlier, Mayor Bean, I'd love some additional information on what some of these other communities have done. You know, what has been their vision, how has that played out? I know we have some pictures of a little deeper dive into how they got there. I think would be pretty helpful.
Anything further before we adjourn for the night? Appreciate everyone's active participation and input and look forward to next steps. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Motion in a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.